Good evening. You are watching the Politics Hub. Well, tonight, MPs are voting right now on whether there should be a national inquiry into grooming gangs. Now, it won't pass, but the Conservatives are trying to pile pressure on Labour. And tonight, both parties are spinning hard. We'll hear from both sides. You can see quite an empty House of Commons behind me now, and that is because MPs are literally in the division lobbies casting their votes at this moment. And it's been a day of politics at its most fierce, most combative, most perilous. The Conservatives have put down an amendment to the Children's Wellbeing in Schools Bill to try and force the inquiry, and I have to say the debate's been pretty fierce. Feelings are running very high in the House right now. And the row of the amendment has also overshadowed the content of the bill itself, which I actually think is really important. There are currently 4 million children in academies and free schools, so an awful lot of kids affected by today. And the legislation, if passed, it would roll back reforms going all the way back to Tony Blair and Andrew Adonis in 2001. Academies would no longer have the freedom to set their own pay and conditions for teachers. They'd also have to follow the national curriculum. Now, Labour say this is all about making sure all children get an excellent education. The Conservatives say it's an act of political vandalism that would abolish academies in all but name. Who's right? Well, there is a lot of political fireworks going on this evening. We're going to be covering all of that, but we'll also be talking about the substance of a bill that could have a huge impact on education in this country. Well, let's have a look now, shall we, at what is going on in the House of Commons, because they're currently voting. We'll come back to that, of course, as soon as we get that result. Some MPs are starting to file in there. Now, as they do, the other major developing story tonight, of course, are the wildfires in California. 4 fires, fuelled by strong winds of up to 100 miles an hour, are spreading across Los Angeles right now. The scale of the damage has been emerging as tens of thousands of people have been forced to leave their homes. 2 people have been confirmed dead, and a state of emergency has been declared in California. Now, these pictures that have been coming in through the day give an idea of exactly what the fire crews are up against. More than 1,000 structures have been destroyed, and of course, as you can imagine, that includes many, many homes. Strong winds are whipping up the flames and stopping firefighting aircraft from attacking the fires from above, making their job all the more difficult. So they're doing what they can on the ground, with the Los Angeles Fire Department putting out a plea for off-duty staff to come and help if they can. Well, at least 80,000 people are now under evacuation orders. And as they fled, some homeowners have filled rubbish bins, tubs, other containers with water around their properties, hoping to help fire crews hold back those fires. But you can really see the extent of them there in these the footage. And people evacuated, of course, include the most vulnerable, like these residents of an elderly care home, which is just northeast of Los Angeles. The video shows them, many of them, of course, in wheelchairs on that smoky, windswept road with the glow of those emergency vehicles behind them. Well, emergency services, led by the Los Angeles Fire Department, have given an update on the disaster. Here's some of what they had to say about the Eaton fire. Now, that's just one of the 4 blazes that are growing in Los Angeles.
We have over 2,000 acres burning at this time, and the fire continues to grow with 0% containment. We have over 500 personnel assigned, and unfortunately, we have 2 reported fatalities to civilians. Unknown cause at this time, and we do have a number of significant injuries. We have over 100 structures destroyed, and the cause of the fire is unknown and under investigation.
We'll keep you up to date on those fires, but back here in Westminster, we've got, of course, the vote that's taking place right now. It's on Conservative calls for a national inquiry into the grooming gangs scandal, and that vote result we will be able to bring you live in just a few moments. But as you would expect, the issue dominated the first Prime Minister's Questions of the year, which was earlier in the Commons. Here's our political correspondent, Tamara Cohen.
Horrific child abuse scandals across the country now at the top of the political agenda as the party leaders clash about whether a national inquiry is needed. Keir Starmer insisted not at Prime Minister's Questions.
This morning I met some of the victims and survivors of this scandal, And they were clear with me that they want action now, not the delay of a further inquiry. The J inquiry, the last national inquiry, was 7 years.
Kemi Badenoch and the Conservatives will force a vote on one today. With Labour against it, it's unlikely to succeed.
This issue of a delay is a weak excuse, and I would say to him that by refusing this inquiry, he is enabling those people who wish to smear all British Muslims based on the actions of a small minority. He is talking about distraction tactics. Let us have the truth. The Prime Minister cannot tell the House the full scale of the scandal.
Ministers now saying an inquiry may happen further down the track.
Like I say, nothing is off the table. Nothing is off the table. And if the victims come forward to me in this victims panel that I will make, and they say, actually, we think there needs to be a national inquiry into this or a linking up of that, I'm going to, I'll listen to them.
The scandal of child grooming gangs is back in the spotlight here for reasons largely beyond the Prime Minister's control. But now the pressure is on. Those representing victims want to make sure this isn't just a political row, but an opportunity for real change.
A national inquiry would only really bring into the public eye things that those of us working in the sector already know. We already know that it's happening in lots of towns and cities. We already know the modus operandi of these gangs. My priority is future prevention of this type of thing. If a government wants to spend a load of money just telling us what we already really know, then fine.
An issue which has been in dark corners for too long now promises this government will enact recommendations. Time will tell if it makes a real difference. Tamara Cohen, Sky News, Westminster.
Well, our chief political correspondent John Craig joins us now from Parliament's Central Lobby. And John, we can see MPs starting to filter back into the chamber after this vote. How do you expect it to go?
Well, it'll be a thumping victory for the government and obviously in terms of numbers a crushing defeat for Kemi Badenoch and the Conservatives. Remember, there are 121 Conservative MPs. Well, I would expect probably the 5 Reform MPs will join them because they put down a similar amendment calling for an inquiry as well. Perhaps some of the other parties perhaps may back them as well. Will there be any Labour rebels? I doubt it, although there have been some concerns expressed by some Labour MPs about the bill as a whole. This is the bill, a big chunky thing, about 120-odd pages. The last speech in the debate was from Kat McKinnell, the schools minister, and she spent a lot of her speech talking about what the provisions in this bill, as you've said, Sophie, the controversial moves to strip away some of the powers of academies and basically take away their autonomy. According to the Conservative amendment, it effectively abolishes academy freedoms. That's what the Conservative amendment says. But on the question of the abuse inquiry, the grooming, child sexual exploitation and grooming gangs, right at the end of the debate, Kat McKinnell was challenged by Esther McVey, the former Conservative minister, about why the government was opposed to this call for an inquiry. The time for talk is over, was the response from Kat McKinnell, repeating what the PM had said during the Prime Minister's questions about how another inquiry would delay matters. However, I have to say, MPs coming out of the chamber during the debate were saying to me that they thought the comments that we heard in Tamara's report from Jess Phillips here on Sky News were very significant, a slight shift in the government's position. If Jess Phillips was saying if the victims, and the PM talked about meeting them, wanted another inquiry, nothing was off the table. That, according to Conservative MPs, was something of a shift. But the Tories simply don't have the numbers. The Labour MPs are accusing Kemi Badenoch of opportunism, and the Prime Minister earlier in the day was basically highlighting the fact that when she was Women and Equalities Minister, Kemi Badenoch never raised it, and he's used that phrase about jumping on a bandwagon. I could just see Chris Philp, actually. Come and talk to Sky News. OK, all right. Well, you heard that. Chris Philp's going to come and talk to us as soon as we know the result. You got... he's gone.
Oh, sorry, we'll hold on to that,
Might be able
John.
to bring you Chris Phelps straight away, but we're
I
bringing
love that.
soon.
Well done. You've got him nailed down
to
for us.
soon.
Thank you. I love it. That's great. Thank you for nailing Chris Philp down for us there, John. John Craig there for us in Central Lobby. Well, you can see, of course, the footage from the House of Commons with MPs poised, awaiting, most of them now back in their seats, awaiting for the result. First, of course, on that amendment on whether or not there should be a public inquiry into grooming gangs. It's an amendment putting down by the Conservatives, but also, as John was just telling us, there are some pretty meaty reforms in the wider bill as well, from academies to safeguarding children in the wake of that Sarah Sharif case. But of course, the political theatre in many ways today, all about the grooming gangs. And John, even though, as we've been saying, it's going to be a defeat for the Conservatives, is there a way in which it could still be a political victory? Because it's a bit of a trap, it seems to me, that they want to force Keir Starmer into a position where he's voting against a public inquiry. Well,
during PMQs, Kemi Badenoch said, be a leader, not a lawyer. He repeatedly referred to the time when he was chief prosecutor, and he did approach it in a very lawyerly way. That's a criticism I've heard against Sir Keir from Labour backbenchers as well. He treats Prime Minister's questions like a courtroom rather than the theatre that it is a claim I've heard from some Labour MPs. But yes, the Tories will keep hammering away at this. The Tories believe that public opinion is on their side on this. Now, throughout this week, the Prime Minister, other ministers have been making the point that there have been at least 6 inquiries. Yesterday we heard from Alexis Jay, who said the time for more inquiries is over. And the line really from government ministers is that and the PM is that it's action that's required, not more inquiries. The PM was talking about how the Jay inquiry took 7 years. If there was another one, that would take you to 2031. Kemi Badenoch hit back and said, well, it doesn't have to take that long. So the Tories believe they're on the public is on their side on this, and also Nigel Farage has joined in the calls.
John, I'm just going to come in because
I think
we
we're going to get the
results of the vote.
The ayes to the right, 111. The noes to the left, 364.
The ayes to the right were 111. The noes to the left, 364. So the noes have it. The noes have it. Unlock.
So you can see there the amendment, as expected, pretty convincingly defeated. Those in support, 111, 364 MPs voting against. So you can see there the vast Labour majority, if you like, rowing in against the amendment from the Conservative Party. John, what are your reflections on that result?
Well, not all Tory MPs voted, did they? 111 is 10 short of their numbers. I don't suppose there was any, I don't know, I'm not aware of any pairing on this. Did some of the minor parties support the Conservatives? So that's a question you can put to Chris Philp very shortly. You can just hear the division bell now. That is for the vote on the second reading on the bill. So, yes, the Conservatives have been crushed here, but we can expect, no doubt, to hear from Mr Philp that the public opinion is on the side of the Conservatives. The time for talk is over. They were almost the final words from Cat McKinnell right at the end of the debate. And I think, has Chris Philp gone off to vote? Give us a couple of minutes and we will hook up Chris Philp and he will talk to you, Sophie. So why don't you just talk to your guests for a minute or two?
That's great advice, John. Thank you very much. I love this. John Craig directing the programme from Central Lobby. What a joy. Right, as John was saying, let's talk to our guests, shall we? The former Conservative Cabinet Minister, Anne-Marie Trevelyan, and Andrew Fisher, the former Director of Policy for the Labour Party. Great to have you both here. Anne-Marie, first on the show, great to have you here.
Lovely to be here.
I feel that there's two ways of looking at this. Some people think that this is absolutely the right thing for Kemi Badenoch to do. She's got to try and fight on behalf of the victims to get the public inquiry that so many people think is right. Others think that this is political theatrics, that it would, if you're going to vote for this, it would kind of wreck the whole bill. It's never going to pass. What's she playing at? What's your view?
So when you're in the opposition, you're not usually going to win. So by definition, as the vote showed, the chances of making the reasoned amendment work and bring down the bill were very, very small. But that doesn't mean, because we're in the opposition, that we shouldn't stand up, as you say, for those whose voice needs to be heard. Now, really interesting through PMQ today, that discussion that, she never spoke about it. This is a Home Office matter. So when you're a government minister, you can only speak in your own lane. So she talked often in her speeches and women equality speeches about these issues. There's something that actually...
come on, you can talk about things.
Not in the dispatch box, not when they're not your brief.
She did say that she hadn't met any grooming victims as well, though, didn't she?
So I think that's possible, but I think the challenge here is that this is a... And I think there's a frustration for me. I look at this, with a level of, separation now. We accepted the J recommendations, and indeed some of them were coming through in the criminal justice bill, which started in November 23, but of course sadly fell away because the election was called. So quite a lot of the, if you like, the homework to take the J recommendations into legislation are there, and I hope that Labour will pick them up. But there's no reason to not also tackle that big elephant in the room, which is we have not looked at a national level at this cultural problem that we haven't really looked in the eye.
Andrew, a quick thought from you, so we'll come back. But
yeah, look, I think it's been pretty hideous over the last 72 hours that every bit of political game playing over what is a really, really serious issue. I mean, look, trying to defeat a bill that brings in extra protections on safeguarding and indeed make some important reforms about education was never going to be the way to try and get a national inquiry anyway. So this is, again, kind of political theatre. It's not a serious attempt to get a national inquiry. They knew they'd lose because Labour wants its bill through. And actually, there's bits of the bill which are really important in terms of child safeguarding. So I think it is quite unseemly. And for the, some of the array of people that have been calling for this and some of the things they've been saying show that they haven't got much interest in the victims, which ought to be at the centre of this, and no side has a monopoly on that. I think it's important to say it shouldn't be a partisan issue.
It's a very important point. We'll come back for more discussion, but we do need to just talk to the Shadow Home Secretary, Chris Philp, who's in at Central Lobby for us. Your amendment failed. Was it ever the right amendment to bring, given it would bring down the whole bill?
Oh, good evening, Sophie. Yes, I think it was the right thing to do because this is such an important national issue, as Kemi Badenoch said at Prime Minister's questions earlier today. We do need this statutory national public inquiry to look into this scandal because, firstly, the previous inquiries have been limited. The ICSA report only looked at 6 towns, and there have been a small handful of local reports, but many towns, places like Keighley, haven't been looked at all. And then secondly, the local inquiries that have happened, like the one in Manchester, don't have the powers, the legal powers, to make public bodies produce evidence. And in fact, for that reason, the Manchester inquiry chairs actually resigned last year. And because this is such a serious scandal where young, vulnerable, early teenage girls were systematically raped by gangs of men, predominantly of Pakistani heritage, and local bodies, local councils, the police, the Crown Prosecution Service, let them down by not investigating properly and in some cases even actively covering this up. That is so serious. We do need this to be properly investigated. Lots of work has been done already under the previous governments, but frankly it's not enough and we do need to do more, and it is so important. We wanted to put that to a vote today, and I'm very disappointed, frustrated and angry that the government haven't agreed to this inquiry. Keir Starmer could have stood up in the dispatch box this afternoon and agreed to an inquiry, but he didn't.
I absolutely appreciate your words about the victims here and the crimes that they suffered and the way that they were treated, as you say, by the people who were supposed to be protecting them. The debate is about what the best way forward is, and a lot of what you were saying that answer was saying that the J report was just insufficient. I mean, I'm just interested to know why you think that. I mean, have you read the J report? Have you read the whole thing?
Yeah, I mean, it's 473 pages long, as you probably know, and it covers a whole range of historic child sex abuse issues that are way beyond these grooming gangs. It talks about things like, abuse by the church in the 1970s.
Have you read it?
Only a
I appreciate it. I know it's long, 400 pages. I get it, but have you read it?
Yes, I've read it, and it covers a lot of different areas, and the grooming gangs are not mentioned particularly often, and that report only looks at 6 of the towns that were affected, and obviously we know there are probably 40 or 50 towns that were affected. So look, it was a good starting point, and of course the recommendation should be implemented, but it doesn't give a complete picture. And these local inquiries, there are a few other local inquiries, like the Manchester one that I've mentioned already, but they don't have the legal powers to compel the production of evidence, and only a national inquiry will do that. And this is so serious. Public bodies covered this up when young, vulnerable girls were being systemically abused. The state should have protected them. The police, local councils, the Crown Prosecution Service as well should have protected them at this terrible time in their lives, and they were let down. And the truth needs to come out. And I'm just mystified, to be honest, as to why the Prime Minister, who I think in the last Parliament himself called for 9 or 10 inquiries of different kinds, why he thinks this issue that is so serious, I don't know why he thinks this doesn't merit a proper inquiry when he asked for so many inquiries in the last Parliament.
Can I ask you about something that has slightly puzzled me today? Kemi Badenoch's spokesperson said that she hasn't met any grooming victims and has no plans to. I was genuinely quite surprised by that. Don't you think she should?
Look, I mean, I can't speak to that point because we haven't discussed it, so I don't want to speculate when I haven't.
Well, it's not really speculating. That's what a spokesperson said.
OK, well, I'm afraid I can't speak any further to that because I haven't discussed it with her office. But the most important point is that it's important we think about victims in this, and victims' families have been saying that they do want a proper inquiry so the truth can come out, because having gone through this terrible experience, having been, suffered this awful abuse at the hands of these gangs, to be let down by the police and by local councils, and particularly local councils may well have deliberately turned a blind eye to this. They do need to know what happened, and the people responsible need to be held to account. As far as I'm aware, not a single person, not one, in a position of authority has been held to account for letting these girls down, either by negligence or by actively covering it up. Not a single person. And that is the kind of thing that an inquiry can get into. There is a criminal offence, misconduct in public office, and if there are people identified who were in positions of authority who were negligent or who covered this up, they should be prosecuted for that crime of misconduct in public office. And by refusing to have this inquiry, the government is making it harder, maybe even impossible, to get to the truth. And that is why what the Labour government and Keir Starmer have done today, I think, is so upsetting. But I asked them to reconsider. It's not too late.
Although they would say
and change their mind.
Just very quickly, I know we're almost out of time, but it is important for me to put the other side, which is they would say they can't accept your amendment even if they wanted to, because it would then bring down the whole of this bill, which includes some very important child safeguarding measures brought in to protect Sarah Sharif of the futures happening.
Yeah, look, I mean, the majority of this bill was about scrapping Michael Gove's education reforms and even Tony Blair's education reforms, which have increased education standards.
We'll talk about that in the next interview, but there is important child safeguarding things in this bill as well, right?
Yeah, look, the point is we needed to get, as a matter of urgency, we needed to get a vote, and this was a way of getting a vote quickly. But frankly, what the government should have done, it shouldn't have required a vote, really, at any time. In fact, not just today, but in the future, tomorrow, next week, Keir Starmer at any time could simply make a decision as Prime Minister to hold this statutory national public inquiry. He can just do that as his decision as Prime Minister, or Yvette Cooper as Home Secretary, and that is what they should do. And he's not going to do it today, and he's clearly not going to do it today. He should do it tomorrow. He should do it next week. It is in his power as Prime Minister to give victims truth and justice. And he's, I think, let them down, I'm afraid, today. But he can do the right thing in the future, and I really do urge that he does that, change his mind.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed, Chris Philp, speaking to us there.
Thank you.
Well, before tonight's votes, I also spoke to the Education Minister, Stephen Morgan. Thank you very much for being on the programme. Great to have you with us this evening. So today, Labour's going to vote against a public inquiry into grooming gangs. Just explain why.
So the government's taking action as quickly as we possibly can on these issues. The Children's Wellbeing and Schools Bill brings forward a series of measures to keep children safe. That includes a unique number for children, a bit similar to National Insurance number, and also a register to make sure we know where children are that have gone missing, and also particular measures to make sure that parents that have child protection plans for their children don't automatically have the right to homeschool a child. So a series of measures. We're getting on with it and taking action as quickly as we possibly can.
I do want to talk about the detail of this bill. It's a very big bill, there's lots in it, it's very important, but just specifically on the grooming gangs, of course, so many people have felt very, very strongly about in the last few weeks. I'm slightly confused, I'm not going to lie, because Jess Phillips, obviously a minister, told Sky News' Beth Rigby yesterday that if victims come forward to me in this victims panel and they say, we think there needs to be a national inquiry into this, I'll listen to them. So are you ruling out a national inquiry into grooming gangs or not?
I've listened to what Jess said, and I understand what she's saying is she wants to just listen to what victims say. I think that's a good thing for a government and for a minister.
Well, no, that's not what she said. I'm quoting. If victims come forward to me in this victims panel and they say, we think there needs to be a national inquiry into this, I'll listen to them. So she misspoke.
No, what I'm saying is that she's saying that she's listening to victims, hearing their concerns. What the Prime Minister's very clearly said is that
I'm literally reading out her quote. She's saying she'll listen to victims, and if they think there needs to be a national inquiry, she'll listen to them. You can't just miss out that crucial bit of the quote, can you?
Well, she's listening and engaging with victims. Obviously, it's for her to
but if they want
explain
a national inquiry, she'll ignore them.
What we've said is that it's really important that there are local reviews and inquiries. We know that communities know better about these sorts of issues, and that's where the trust rests in local communities. And we will work with local authorities to make those reviews happen if that's something that is needed.
If victims come forward on the victims panel and want a national inquiry, you're ruling one out in any circumstances. That's what you're saying.
It's a question for the Home Secretary, of course, but obviously what the Prime Minister set out is that we're getting on and delivering. We've delivered legislation
today.
It's not
an answer to my question. It's really not an answer to my question. Are you ruling out a national inquiry into grooming gangs?
Well, the Conservatives had the opportunity to do that, and they didn't take any actions.
Yeah, I absolutely know.
Years.
I absolutely know those arguments. You're right that they didn't do that. You're right. But what will you do? Are you ruling out a national inquiry into grooming gangs?
On the national review, that's a discussion for the Home Secretary. But what we're delivering in the Education Department today is legislation which make a real difference to protecting children, keeping children safe.
I understand why Labour, even if you wanted a national inquiry, you couldn't vote for this amendment because it would wreck your bill. And there's lots of important stuff in your bill, not least the things that you mentioned around child protection and child safety in the wake of Sarah Sharif. Are you open to making changes to the bill at committee stage when it wouldn't derail the whole bill?
If you listen to the debate earlier today in the House, the Liberal Democrats made some really constructive points around saying how they will try to amend the bill through committee stage. That's the right approach to take. What we're seeing from the Conservatives, from the opposition today, is a wrecking amendment, which would basically allow this bill not to go any further. That's political game playing and not what I think victims want. What victims want to see is meaningful change, and that's what we're trying to deliver in government.
But if there are amendments at committee stage for a national inquiry, it's something that you would consider?
Well, we will get to that road when we get to that road. But the Home Secretary obviously will set out more detail in terms of the meaningful actions the Home Office team will be taking in due course.
I want to talk about the substance of the bill now, because it's really important. I feel like on any other day we'd be talking an awful lot about the substance of this bill. I'm particularly interested on the schools changes, because it feels to me like this is really significant. You're rolling back things that were put in by Tony Blair. It's almost taking it to a pre-2001 stage with changes to academies. So all schools will have to follow the curriculum. All schools will have to follow the same pay and conditions. Some people would see this, that you're taking powers and freedoms away from head teachers.
I mean, it's absolute nonsense to suggest we're rolling away freedoms and flexibilities for academies. You want to make sure that every child goes to a brilliant local school, and we see high and rising standards in every school. We want to learn from the best of academies. I work really closely with academies and trust leaders up and down the country and want to make sure that practice is shared, but that schools collaborate more to improve outcomes for every child in every part of the country.
But I'm right to say that they'll have to follow the curriculum and that they'll have to follow the same pay and conditions. That's correct, right?
But we also want to encourage more innovation and flexibility.
So that is freedoms that are being rolled back then?
Yeah, but we're not abolishing academies.
No,
but
they'll have to follow the curriculum, which they don't currently have to do. They'll have to follow the same pay and conditions. That's correct, isn't it?
That's right. And, the national curriculum is something that I benefited from when I was a young person. I think it's absolutely right that young people get a core offer, no matter what school that they go to, so that every child can succeed and thrive, and that's our priority as a government.
Can I also say another thing that you're going to do is that you're going to make it so that schools can't employ teachers without a qualified teacher status that will affect, I think, just over 13,000 teachers. I mean, I thought there was like a recruitment crisis.
What we know that's absolutely key to raising attainment is having brilliant good quality teachers in every school, and that's what we're committed to delivering. We're listening and engaging with the profession. I'm talking to teachers all the time. I want to make sure that every child has a brilliant quality teacher in the classroom that ensures that they can succeed and thrive at school.
I am not like casting any judgment on this. I think there's a really interesting kind of ideological argument here, because what you're emphasising is that every child deserves a good education, every child deserves good teaching. If that means that sometimes great teachers or great head teachers don't have the freedoms and the flexibility to offer that little bit extra, is that worth it if it means that the majority of children's education improves?
So I think we've inherited a system that's fragmented, and we shouldn't be focusing on structures. We should be focusing on improving outcomes for every child, and that's why I want to see more collaboration across schools. We want to make sure there's more flexibilities around the workforce to enable teachers to teach, and also to make sure that we have high and rising standards in every school. I think that means schools need to work more closely together, and we'll be delivering on that through the bill.
And just finally, I want to ask you about what you mentioned at the beginning of the interview about the child safety measures in this bill, in particular the fact that parents won't be able to homeschool if their child is subject to a child protection investigation. This is obviously a reflection on that hugely tragic case of Sarah Sharif, whose parents pulled her out of school and then she died at their hands. Do you think that if this was done earlier, there may have been a chance that she would have lived?
Gosh, I don't know, but obviously I think it's really important that we learn lessons from the past and inform our policy and also our legislation. I'm sad to say that there are still cases out there that will come to light, no doubt in due course, but we need to make sure we take the measures in place, we put meaningful change to deliver the change that our country needs and support children and young people to thrive.
And what's your message to people who are looking effectively to vote down the bill?
I think this is a wrecking amendment. I think it's stupid party politics. Let's focus on the quality of the bill and the measures in the bill that make a real difference to children up and down the country.
OK, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right, let's talk again, shall we, to Anne-Marie and also to Andrew. So much to discuss there, lots to unpick. Should we just kind of start where we were with the grooming gang amendment? Andrew, how do you think Labour played this?
I think they were shocked over the weekend by some of the vitriol and some of the stuff that's been on social media driven by Elon Musk and others. And I think there has been a bit of a bandwagon. I think they've been right to they sort of looked a bit deer in the headlights at first, and then they kind of toughened up and called it out. And actually Bridget Phillipson's interview on Sky this morning, I thought, was another example of that. But, look, if Elon Musk is suddenly concerned about child sex abuse, then why is he, in the cabinet of a convicted sex offender who tried to appoint somebody who's just under investigation for statutory rape and for trafficking children, Matt Gaetz, who Trump was going to appoint Attorney General, or indeed the Education Secretary in the US, or just about to be the Education Secretary in the US, who was co-owner of a company that oversaw child sex abuse for years, and there are lawsuits in the US about that now. So if Elon Musk really cares about child protection, he's got a few targets closer to home to call out, I'm afraid, rather than picking on one ethnicity in the UK, a country he clearly doesn't know about, clearly hasn't read the J report, whether or not Chris Philp has. And I think it's been quite unseemly, because actually you can tell these people don't care about child protection about this. And I think it's really important when you've got Andrew Tate, who's literally up on charges and up for extradition to this country on charges of rape and trafficking. I'm sorry, I've got no interest in what some of these people have got to say on anything, frankly, but especially on child protection. It's just not credible. And I think Labour has to be tough in calling that out, but it also has to have a different tone, which is empathetic, sympathetic, and on the side of campaigners for justice, because this is a huge, long-running injustice that cuts across council areas, the Church of England that we saw just before Christmas when the Archbishop of Canterbury resigned over covering up a paedophile. And that's not the first case in the Church of England, and other institutions as well. I'm not trying to pick on the Church of England here, but it has gone across the BBC and the Jimmy Savile stuff. There hasn't been a national public inquiry with the ability to do that right across the piece. And, there are thousands and thousands of cases every year of children, and most of them happen within the family home, sadly, by relatives and some of these still aren't being... There are still, I think, improvements that could be made in the police and in social services as to how these happen as well. So it has to be broad, it has to put children at the centre of it, and it has to get a real thing. And if there is a gap in that, and I think there is an argument for that, and it's interesting that Jess Phillips left the door open to that, then of course they should maybe look at that. But they're also right that let's get on and implement the findings of the last inquiry. And just very quickly, I just have to say, if Chris Philp there, I think the missing point of that was he had 14 years in government to have done this. If the J inquiry was limited, why didn't they set it up to be a public inquiry? Why didn't they set it up afterwards and go, actually, that's a bit limited, we need more? This came across their case. They turned down Oldham in 2022, I think, or 2023, when they called on the government to do a national inquiry. So there's a bit of hypocrisy here that just doesn't sit right on such a serious issue.
I mean, you were, in part of that cabinet at the time, and what would you say to Andrew's point, that why on earth didn't the Conservatives do more about this when they were in power?
Well, so I think, Andrew and I are at risk of being in violent agreement on a lot of things, which is this is a systemic problem that we have with the way some of our public institutions work. I would say, you can't say this probably comfortably. As a woman, there are levels of misogyny that live through some of our systems still, where you have great councils that are amazing and some where they're not, great police forces where their ability to respect and look after and protect women and girls is amazing, and others where it's not so good. These are real issues that we are tackling, we're learning as a society to get better at. But I think this is an opportunity, whether we should have called it out before. The J report covered a lot of issues, not really this as much as could, but it's an opportunity to really take on something that we know is still not right in our societies. I was talking to Andrew earlier, one of the things that's always driven me nuts is, if there's abuse in a family, the mum and kids are taken away into hiding. Yeah. Do you know what? Can the abuser just be removed, please, very far away, and, monitored with a tag? We have technology so that he can't come anywhere near the family. Yeah, why is it that the women and children are left vulnerable, unprotected, and last, at the end of the track? So I think there's an opportunity here, and I really hope that Jess Phillips will take that incredible political capital that she's got personally as an amazing campaigner for decades and persuade Keir Starmer that this is worth doing.
So just on one thing there, I think it's worth saying, and Chris Philp said the same thing about the J inquiry didn't cover grooming. There was a specific report, a specific strand of the inquiry that did look specifically at what they called organised networks.
Yes, it was just one
grooming
part,
case.
wasn't it? Yes.
But it was an entire separate 400-page or several hundred-page report within the inquiry into that specific thing. So I don't think it's fair to say they didn't look at this. They did look at it, and they looked at it in broad brush. They didn't look at individual council cases.
And
you're right.
One of the pieces that was in the Criminal Justice Bill, which sadly, fell because of the election, was about making that that particular thing a criminal offence, and that was which it isn't at the moment. So I hope that will be picked up by Labour.
It's clear you two could talk about this for a long time, as many people do. Passions really run high on this story in particular. Thank you. Well, of course, the grooming gang story and the vote expected to be in tomorrow's newspapers. You are watching the Politics Hub right now, though. Coming up, more bad news for the cost of government borrowing, pushing the pound to a 9-month low. Should we be worried? Plus the latest from the United States as tens of thousands of people flee their homes as wildfires rage in Southern California. We'll have the latest.
I'm David Blevins, and I'm Sky's senior Ireland correspondent. It takes 60 minutes to cross the Irish Sea. It took the British monarchy a century. I've spent 30 years reporting the journey from conflict to peace.
The political parties of Northern Ireland have reached agreement.
If there's anyone who might know how to fix Northern Ireland's devolved government, it's the American architect.
Changes in circumstance require changes in approach.
The end of the political stalemate, the start of a new chapter for Northern Ireland.
I confirmed that I am willing to take up the office of First Minister. My election to the post of First Minister demonstrates the change that's happening on this island.
Catholics and Protestants on different sides, now facing the same threat.
If we both contract COVID-19 and end up in hospital, religion's nothing.
People here are adept at finding hope amid adversity. That's the spirit of a place that punches way above its weight. We help you understand the world with us. A toxic blue-green algae now poisoning Loch Ness. It's breaking your heart what has happened here.
It is.
This is a vital resource, a national treasure, now fighting for its very life. They are effectively surrounded by Northern Ireland, and that makes this the most unlikely of international frontiers.
If there's a hard border, I think it'll cripple the country.
Winter is coming. Welcome to Winterfell. It's an iconic location in this globally acclaimed drama. Ophelia was the most powerful hurricane this far east in the Atlantic on record.
Sky News, the full story first.
Weeknights on Sky News.
This is your chance. Tell people.
Welcome to the Politics Hub.
Our police force has apologised. If you want to find out about Grimsby, you come to the docks.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Are you not concerned that that could lead to all-out war?
Hello there, good evening. There are fears of an upsurge in violence. What's at stake here?
You are watching the press preview, a first look at the front pages as they arrive.
Hello, welcome back. You are watching the Politics Hub. I just want to, of course, bring you the latest on the busy evening in the Commons. But before we do so, these are the latest pictures on the extraordinary scenes coming out of the United States this evening. It's been confirmed tonight that 2 people have been killed in the wildfires that have been ripping through neighbourhoods in California. Now, the reason is strong winds, which have also, of course, led to what's been described as a high number of injuries to people living there and also to firefighters. 70,000 people have been told to leave their homes as well. Well, our US correspondent Martha Kellner has the latest from the Pacific Palisades.
People here are very much not out of the woods yet. We expect this wind to continue until at least midday today. And these fires, 0% contained at the moment. So it continues to be a very dangerous situation. And officials there saying that life-saving continues to be their key priority. I'm in Pacific Palisades, as you mentioned, which is the epicentre of this firestorm. It's hard to believe to look at it now, but this is the very centre of Pacific Palisades, which is one of LA's most exclusive upmarket suburbs. The likes of Reese Witherspoon, Tom Hanks, Ben Affleck, they all have homes here. They were all evacuated yesterday. The building that you can see now is home, used to be home to a couple of coffee shops, an Italian restaurant, and a bank was in there. And then if you look just over the other side of the road, in here was a clothes shop, a smoothie bar, a dry cleaners, all of those businesses now gone. And I drove into Pacific Palisades this morning, and these spot fires are still raging. Firefighters are still trying to get them under control, even amid what are reported water shortages. So this continues to be a volatile situation with these fires sparking up all over the place. You can see some of the heavy black acrid smoke in the background from a blaze that's still ongoing just in that structure beyond where we are now. As we've been hearing from officials, 2 people have sadly died as a result of these fires. They actually lost their lives in a fire in the east of the city in a place called Altadena. There are a number of injuries reported, including to a 25-year-old female firefighter who suffered a serious head injury trying to tackle these blazes yesterday evening. It is, as you can see, almost complete devastation here. There are very few buildings left untouched in Pacific Palisades. And it's a similar scene along Pacific Coast Highway, which is, anyone who's visited LA will know, is one of the iconic roads here. It's one of the most beautiful coastal roads in the country. Well, many of the bars, restaurants, multi-million-dollar homes that line that Pacific Coast Highway, they are up in flames or already burned down today. So many people here waking up to a completely transformed landscape, one that is incredibly painful for many people to confront.
Now, back to the UK, because on yesterday's programme, we told you about a rise in the cost of borrowing for the UK government, and that continued today as a sell-off of government bonds just intensified. The 10-year gilt yield climbed to its highest level since 2008, which means Rachel Reeves could miss her own self-imposed borrowing targets. Well, tonight, the Treasury has responded. We can talk now to our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates. What's happened?
That's right. Last night we told you that the fact that the cost of government debt is going up, and that means less money for schools and hospitals, maybe even less money than Cabinet Ministers were expecting when we get to the spending review. Now, today, after people saw that, there's been lots of inquiries to the Treasury, and the cost of government borrowing, as you were just saying, went up again. And the Treasury has issued a statement. Now, they don't do this very often, but they don't issue statements like this almost at all. Look at this. Let's pull it up. Because it is Rachel Reeves' spokesman saying no one should be under any doubt that meeting the fiscal rules is non-negotiable and the government will have an iron grip on the public finances. Right, Sophie, that is the Chancellor saying, I will keep my promises. Now, the mere fact that the Chancellor is having to tell the world that she will keep her promises is slightly odd. It will immediately cause everybody to worry about whether or not she will. Actually, what's going to happen is there is now, it looks like, according to independent forecasters, a real chance that she will break her self-imposed borrowing limit, having to fund day-to-day government spending through borrowing rather than day-to-day taxation. And as a consequence, she's going to have to take urgent action on March 26th at the spring statement, potentially implementing spending cuts in the spending review. And that will be painful and will put her on a collision course with members of her own cabinet who desperately want more cash. They are very worried about this. But the spectre of government borrowing rising is making people really uncomfortable. Right now, the Tories are demanding that before Rachel Reeves goes to China on Friday, she comes to the House of Commons tomorrow and explain what's going on, what's the consequences, how much extra we're having to pay in debt interest, and what that means for public services. I think Labour MPs are getting worried as well.
This is such a big story, isn't it, Sam? It really could end up having a huge impact on the economy and thus everything in the UK. Sam, thank you very much indeed. Well, that story is sure to feature in tomorrow's newspapers. We'll have our extended press preview from 10:30 this evening with tonight's news and tomorrow's headlines. Joining us will be the Daily Mirror's Associate Editor, Kevin Maguire, and the Daily Mail's Whitehall Editor, that's Claire Ellicott. Right, let's talk to Anne-Marie and Andrew again, shall we? How serious do you think this is? What's going on?
Well, when the markets start to demonstrate anxiety, as they've done, and then it continues for a second day, that says to you they probably don't believe that the Treasury has got it in hand. They don't believe that the Chancellor can sustain it, and they are getting ahead of the challenge.
And you guys know about markets.
So we've,
reaction, right?
we've been there. When you get these, panics, if you like, the Treasury's job is to try and reassure, and presumably that was the intention of that statement. But as Sam said, that's just a statement that would make everyone go, in no doubt, absolutely not. Iron grip. Those are words. When a Prime Minister says I have full confidence in someone, and the following day they resign. All those words suggest that everyone in that building is in a state of real panic about what to do, and it leaves her, as it does with any Chancellor, if she is going to stick to those, to some very serious cuts. Now, there are places where one might cut things. They've spent a lot of money on, wage rises and some of the big spends over the summer with transport. Bills and stuff. So, political choices taken, absolutely, that's their right to do. But she hasn't left herself much room. So I think there's every reason to think she's probably in a very tight corner now.
I did see your eye roll there, by the way, on the wage rises. But do you agree with the wider point on the position of the Chancellor?
It's a very difficult situation. But look, we shouldn't pretend this is just the UK. Similar increases have been happening in the US today, to a lesser extent across Europe as well, actually. This isn't just a UK problem. There's a lot of geopolitical global instability at the moment, which is probably only going to get worse over the coming month as Donald Trump perhaps comes in and upends global trade agreements, and possibly affects, some matters of war and peace as well, and makes things worse. And that's why the markets have got the jitters. And look, every economy, France, Germany, the UK, the US, is not doing great at the moment. Let's be frank. And that's been a long-running problem. And if you look at UK interest rates, they shot up at the end of 2021. They then spiked again in 2022 around the Truss Kwarteng budget, and they've kind of stayed there. They're up slightly from that, but if you look at it over a long period, they
brought inflation down from 11% back down.
That's inflation, not interest rates.
Yeah,
Let's just be clear, they're two different things.
No, but interest rates have therefore stabilised, but the Bank of England is in a steady way managing that pressure, which is
There's a wider economic problem, which is why I rolled my eyes as Sophie grasped on me behind you.
Sorry about that.
But no, it's fine. I'm perfectly happy to explain why. No, it's good. It's good. I'm quite happy to say that. But look, we are in an economy where there is a lack of consumer demand. You look at the retail sales figures that came out from the British Retail Consortium. The only way, we're an 80% services economy. If you want our economy to grow, you need higher levels of disposable income. Putting money into people's pockets is a way of achieving that. And also, if you want to tackle the backlogs in the public services, whether that's the NHS or the court system or the lack of teachers in schools, you need to be able to recruit and retain those staff.
But
that's really important.
The other way to do that is to ensure you enable growth and you create the right environment.
Yeah, but no government's done that for 15 years, frankly, stably.
We had higher job numbers, year on year.
What, not under Osborne you didn't? You had nearly 3 million unemployed.
Yeah, but came down and, 800 new jobs every day, huge numbers of growth. But then
unemployment's been going up from the end of 2023.
Then what we saw was a budget which she talked about growth, where she slammed every SME.
I think their economic strategy is wrong.
I'm going to have to get my sharp elbows out, honestly.
Disappointed.
I really am. Thanks both very much indeed, Andrew and Anne-Marie there. Still to come on the Politics Hub. We'll tell you why the government has spent £80,000 refurbishing the Downing Street briefing room. So it's giving me flashbacks.
Coming up on the UK Tonight at 8, we'll hear from one of the Brits caught up in the California wildfires as a state of emergency is declared and tens of thousands of people are evacuated. Plus, as MPs vote against a new national inquiry into the grooming gang scandal, we'll be speaking to one of the victims at the heart of the story. All that, much more on the UK Tonight at 8.
Big stories don't always come from big cities. I'm Lisa Dowd and I'm Sky's Midlands correspondent.
You are not getting in this elevator, okay?
The judge made it very clear that she could see no justifiable reason why Sakulas wasn't here facing British justice.
I promised I would get him justice.
Free, wherever you get your news. This is what they're up against. The wind is the really big problems. It is back-breaking work and the smoke is thick. It's been working well. Water levels are dropping, but no one knows what impact further rain will have. What would you do if this place wasn't open? This is the exact spot in Nottingham where their 19-year-old son, Barnaby Webber, lost his life.
I just think it's so cruel and so harsh.
It's really scary. We're terrified.
In this community, I'm told that everybody knows someone affected by COVID.
Hopefully this will be the last wave.
Sky News gets the full story first. Change seems tantalisingly close in this corner of the UK. Wales was the first to introduce the plastic bag charge. It's legal to let go. Set the speed and take the hands off. It's almost driverless, but not quite. Hans is a highly trained police dog. The force is incredible. It's really frightening, actually. This is my patch, my specialism. It's also my home.
Two clubs separated by a 3.5-mile stretch of urban North London. The North London derby occupies centre stage. And that's a beautiful finish. Champions Circle, that's just stunning.
The North London derby, only on Peacock.
Hello, welcome back to the Politics Hub. Now, during the pandemic, we became all too familiar with this room. I feel like I'm getting serious kind of flashbacks here, but this is the Downing Street briefing room, which of course was used by the Prime Minister, then Boris Johnson, and also others to keep us updated on COVID restrictions and other matters. But it's had a bit of a refurb over Christmas. Now, what's happened is they've taken away this blue background, and the reason is to create what the new government called a more politically neutral setting. Now, the space was created during Boris Johnson's time in power. It cost £2.6 million at the time. The cost of the new look was £80,000. So what do we think? Is it a good use of public money? Do they need to get rid of the shocking blue? Is it all giving you PTSD, thinking about all what happened in that room? Let's talk to Anne-Marie and Andrew, shall we? What do you reckon? Did you like the blue? Or apparently they've gone for like wood panelling, very classic.
So this is because I'd never really noticed that it was blue before, which is interesting. The 2.6 million was to restore not only, you know, that look.
It wasn't just a painted blue, is what you're saying.
That whole bit of the building had a whole restoration and, you know, it was good for, you know, that kind of modernisation. But, I mean, you could take a paintbrush and, you know, paint it grey or something else. £80,000 to turn what looks to me like a panel into a different colour strikes me as quite a lot of money to spend, notwithstanding that there are other things that might be more important. But
not as much as 2.6 million,
I think what's important is it created a space which was important, which didn't exist in kind of the way we do our politics here, which allows these conversations to be done both in ability to talk, you know, through media, but also to have people there. So it's a good space to use, I think.
Andrew, what do you reckon? Panelling or blue? What team are you on?
Do you know what? I think this is one of those very rare occasions, and I'm quite a political animal, as you might notice. I actually think the decor of Downing Street, the functional bits of Downing Street, not the residents, but the functional bits of Downing Street should actually be a matter for civil servants, right?
Yeah,
it shouldn't be a political thing
point.
of, I want it painted red, I want it painted blue.
You get a bit more consistency
Let's just have it, that's how it looks, that's got, you know, whatever the government insignia is, and some
My
wood
favourite is the
fine neutral. I think that's right.
It's the changing lectern. You know, everyone has a different twist on it. Everyone has
Liz Truss has a
feminine
different
one, the
whirly
jiggly one,
Yeah.
the kind of the sort of solid classic traditional
and
one.
they are different heights as well, obviously.
Yeah,
because,
that's true.
You know, oh, there we go. Thank you.
I mean, that makes sense. Oh, there we go. There's a
Liz with us.
lectern. There's Liz Truss in front of that blue.
Yeah. Yeah,
Maybe
isn't that funny? I'd never registered that it was blue.
Yeah,
that's really
second
weird.
nature to you. That's why, as a Conservative,
It was naturally my environment. Oh,
so then maybe there we go. Look, you did use it, didn't you? Really
well, I mean, and it's good because it gives that, you know, if you like, formality, which I think is a good thing, and I would expect Labour would do the same. It's important when you're talking not only, you know, to you and me, but actually to the world, because these are clips that you show.
I think the briefing room is the right thing to have, but I don't think it should be a partisan. I don't think it should be in party
Civil
colours.
servants choose the decor. There we go.
absolutely.
That's Andrew's ruling. Thanks both very much indeed. Great to have you on the Politics Hub tonight. Thanks for being with us as well. I'll see you tomorrow at 7 p.m.